Hello, how are you today? Thank you so much for having me. My name is Nathaniel Clark, and I'm the managing partner of Chasm Architecture, located here in Atlanta. And your career choice will require grit is kind of my mantra here today. Grit requires perseverance, passion, and when you combine the two of those, that equals power. Uh, I didn't know I was going to be an architect. I didn't even know what an architect was. I remember being in the seventh grade in band, and there were four white gentlemen standing behind me, and they were talking about how black men would never become the president of the United States, how we could not run companies, how we could do, we were only good at sports. And, I played basketball and football and all those things. But just hearing all those things really made me in that moment in the seventh grade decide that I was going to find the whitest profession I could find and dominate it. And I actually graduated high school, still didn't know really what I wanted to do. And I went to Kahoma Community College, which is a small HBCU in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And I attended that school and I was introduced to architecture. I moved on from there and went to Louisiana State University. So what I'm really describing to you today is that my path was non-traditional. It was just sparked by someone that said something very volatile, and now we're in a position where we're doing wonderful things. So I actually graduated Louisiana State University as the first African American to receive the College of Design Dean's Medal. I then received a job without ever having to take an interview in Baton Rouge. In that firm, I went from intern to vice president, second largest stockholder in 8 years. And in 2005, which was 15 years ago on September the 9th, I created Chasm Architecture, which is a firm that I own. I own it 100% by myself. We have 25 staff. The projects that we're working on, if you've ever flown into Atlanta, we designed the canopies over the roadway at the Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson Airport, the busiest airport, most traveled airport in the world. That was a $235 million project, just the canopies. But when you add in the pedestrian bridges at another $55 million, that was one of the largest programs here and at the Atlanta at airport. We're also the corporate architect for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana. We've held that relationship for 10 years. And we redesigned, or we're on the redesign team for the Atlanta Hawks. We groomed a really good relationship with them. They're a wonderful organization. We do renovation projects for them internally, and there's a lot of other things that we're doing that we are really focused on as an architectural firm. So what I say to students is, it's very important to persevere. It's very important to have passion. I only have 8 minutes here, but the most important thing that I can tell any of you is to love yourself. Make sure that that you surround yourself with people that will support your dreams, support your passion. And if they can't get on board, then you find some new friends, right? So I think the most important other thing is, have a lot of faith in yourself and make sure that, the things that you want to do with your career, go for it. Growing up in a small town in North Louisiana, where Delta was born in Monroe, Louisiana, and then, a few years later, with a lot of passion and a lot of grit, we're designing 864-foot long dye grid, ETFE clad canopies over the roadway for the busiest airport in the world. So live your dream, do big things, and you'll always have Nate's support.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Clark. Are there any questions for Mr. Clark before we open up the breakout rooms?
Mr. Clark, tell us a little bit about your that college experience and transitioning to that architecture firm.
You know, the college experience for me started at Kahoma Community College, which I say was a HBCU in Clarksdale, Mississippi. You know, I didn't really have a path until I got to that school. Didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. You know, my mom just told me, "Hey, you got to get out of my house," right? And my dad, right? So you got to get out of the house. You got to go and find yourself. And you know, I got that confidence at Kahoma Community College because, you know, when I transitioned out, and actually I graduated Kahoma Community College in drafting and design as the highest academic achievement in drafting and design. So from 89 to 91, I attended that school. And then what they told me there was you can compete anywhere, right? So when I went to LSU, I transitioned from Kahoma to LSU with the confidence that, hey, an HBCU will land you in any profession that you want to be in, right? And you don't have to think that you're lesser than just because you're at a HBCU. I mean, we design student housing, we do all kinds of things for HBCU campuses because we find that most majority firms don't give or put their A team on these campuses, right?
True.
So the transition for me from LSU to the profession was just the attitude and confidence that, hey, I can compete with anybody on the planet as it relates to what I bring to the table as an African American architect. And the other thing was it requires sacrifice, right? So when I attended LSU, which was a party school, I never went to a home football game. I never went to a football game the entire time I was at LSU. So what I'm telling the students, you have to sacrifice so that you can live the life that you want to live long term. And I'm not saying don't have fun, but I'm saying that there's times where I can look back and the friends that I know that were partying back in the day, you know, I'm a little bit more comfortable than they are now just because I put that work in back then.
Yeah.
So be very serious about, you know, your profession, your track. You don't have to know what you want to do when you graduate high school. You know, just be excellent, focused, and sometimes your path will find you.
I also wanted to say that you're being modest about where you come from. You came from the Mississippi Delta. Clarksdale, Mississippi is the home of Sam Cooke and the lots of other really important people. But it's also a community that is void of medical doctors, high rates of diabetes and whatnot, because we haven't had a focus on on the Mississippi Delta. Now there is, and so I just think that the grit that you talk about is based on knowing who you are, knowing how to not let negative comments seep into your psyche, not allowing for individuals to define who you are, and having an intentional pathway, have purpose, have goals and objectives to meet, and to do the sacrifice, because in the end, you will not be sacrificing. So your story is extraordinary and just excited. And I hope that our students get a chance to talk about how you got those contracts with the Atlanta Jackson Airport and the kind of work that you're doing that's first class on these HBCU campuses, because you're bringing your A game.
Nate, thank you very much. And Dr. Matthews, that's a segue into what I was going to ask Mr. Clark. He was our neighbor for a while next door. So Nate, you didn't just wake up one morning and get a contract for $225 million to do the biggest academy almost in the world, and certainly the newest. How did you create the network to be able to establish those kind of relationships?
So this is what I do not do, right? I don't sit on boards. I don't really market. I just hired my first business development person in year 14 of my firm. What I tell everyone is this: if you focus, and this is athletics, this is anything you want to be good at, right? If you focus on you and what you bring to the table and your talent, and you get really good at what you do, then people will find you, right? So I think the key is, if you're not good, nobody's going, you can be good. You can go out and have a good marketing game, right? And then if you don't back that up, then nobody wants to talk to you. But if you spend most of your time perfecting your craft, then those other guys are going to water down and you're going to continue to rise, and you don't have to spend a lot of time because, you know, folks find out who the good folks are, right? LeBron James and Michael Jordan don't have to talk, right? They just go out and perform. So I think when you're performing and you're executing, you have to focus on that as young adults, to finish things, right? You can't start something and not finish it, and then you also have to finish it well. So, and that's for old folks as well, right? So, you know, I got the gray beard now, so I'm kind of getting that. I have to remind myself of those things, that you have to finish what you start. And then to the contract, you know, it was that's how we got the contract. I showed up to a meeting and we had 5 or 6 architects who wanted to partner with us because we had a great reputation of executing work in Atlanta. And that's how we got the contract. And we had an opportunity to be on 2 teams. But one of the teams did not want us to sit at the leadership position because they had already formulated their team. The city of Atlanta allows you to sit on both. They allow you to sit on as a joint venture partner and as a sub simultaneously. But I didn't want to be in my own city, considered a sub in my own city. So we told the other guys that we were only going to sit on one team, and that was in the joint venture prime seat. And, you know, that's how we played that. So, and we won. So, you know, we were sought after. We got on the one team because if you're going to play in the Super Bowl, you play in the Super Bowl, and you can't worry about losing, right? You can't always split yourself on multiple teams and consider yourself a primary voice, right? So that's how we were able to navigate that.
So Nate talks about being an architect, and he is musically talented as well, but part of his holistic approach of being good at what he does is how he commits himself to the community. And we've not talked about that since we've been here. Can you share with us some of your community engagement and community time that you commit to helping people here in the city of Atlanta and in other cities where your practices are?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing to do is to be an example, right? So, you know, we have Chasm Academy, and we mentor young folks, because, you know, when I was in the 8th and 9th grade, no one was really talking to me about, you know, the professional avenues that I could take beyond what I could see, right? So I think giving back and being a mentor, anytime someone invites me to do something, whether it's 8 minutes that turns into 2 hours, or 2 hours that turns into 30 seconds, you know, I try to voice my opinion about my track, right? Which is an unconventional thing. Didn't have that silver spoon, which probably none of us did. So it's all about grit. It's all about, you know, finding your path and executing at a high level and not listening to anyone. So some of the young generation needs to hear that it's not easy, that, you know, we grew up across the street from a chemical plant. So, you know, if you grew up across the street from a sewer treatment plant, then we have similar paths. So there are no excuses. So get rid of the excuses and execute. And I think that's part of that community discussion, is that, hey, you're not out here by yourself. You know, you're not out here and you can't be successful. Decide that you want to be successful. And whatever you put in your mind is the mirror that you're going to see later on. So I used to coach AAU basketball, and we would take inner city kids around the country. And the one thing I would tell them is that if you want to be a gangster, eventually you're going to find yourself in a gangster situation. Mm-hmm. So uplift your mind, your thoughts, if you want to fly in yachts and land a helicopter on a yacht in the Bahamian Sea, then if you concentrate on that long enough, it'll happen.
Okay. You're on mute, Dr. Matthews Juarez. So, Mr. Clark, and I know this as a matter of personal experience, Mr. Clark went up to one of the local academies down the street for youth in the Tri-Cities High School. And he showed up and he told people he was an architect. And if Nate will remember, these kids looked at him and they told him, I didn't know Black people could be architects. And the next question they asked him was, what do architects do? So what he's talked about are many of the activities that Dr. Hargrove and Dr. Matthews Juarez and others have talked about. So the grid is very important, and we thank you so very much for joining us. And we're trying to get all of these people back in their room. So Dr. Van Stry, I wanted to ask you a question because I know that she is involved in some of the community things. That you have any questions for Mr. Clark or Dr. Hargrove or any of the others of you? Any more questions for Mr. Clark?
I guess my question for Mr. Clark is, does he have any internship opportunities at his firm for our students? I know we have some students that are really interested in architecture, and Lane being a liberal arts school, we don't have that program, although we're really super excited about this MOU so we can help them to get into architecture. So just wondering if you had any opportunities for them.
We always mentor. We're always looking for opportunities to bring in young, talented staff. We also even have a program in our office where we meet with high school, and we brought in students from high schools through. It wasn't Weissers. It was another woman-owned, a woman-affiliated conference. Anyway, we brought students into our office, and they mentored or shadowed us, I think, for like 5 months. So I've done this on 5 or 6 occasions, and it's really good because it does expose a student who may not know what an architect does into the real understanding of writing contracts. It's not just sitting down. Folks say you have to be good at math and science and art, but there's so much more to it than that, right? So it is a business, right? I don't even get to do architecture as much as I'd like to because, my focus is entrepreneurship and how I can show someone how to run a company so that they can either do it themselves or they can help me do it better.
One of the things, the last question, and we can answer it at the close, is that how do you, to describe how architectural work fits into engineering, and what are some of the underpinnings that you must achieve in terms of the courses that you must achieve before you become a part of that team? And we can either, because of the time, we can either have Mr. Clark address that now, or we can address it in the closing.
Now is good.
Okay, Mr. Clark.
From an engineering standpoint, if you look at the picture behind my head of the canopies, that is a structural project, right? And we were integrated with our structural engineer, who is Matt Breedenthal, on this project. And, an airport never sleeps. So that means the roadway never sleeps. So we had to figure out a way from an engineering standpoint to land this canopy on top of the existing terminal while people were still in it. And what folks don't know is there's the baggage compartment runs under the segments of the roadway. So, and then we had to add structure on the other side. So it was finding a way to make all of that spaghetti work while you're still in an active, livable, breathing airport that stays open 24 hours. So the integration of engineering, you know, we had civil engineers, we had roadway engineers, we had structural engineers, we had MEP engineers, and then you had the specialty engineers who were doing other things. So there's this big group of folks that are specialized technically, and then you had the attorneys and you had all kinds of folks. So there's this big group of folks that are tethered together to make a project like this work. And you got to have that understanding as the architect of all of those aspects. So you can't just have a structural engineer on your team and they tell you one thing that can or can't work, but you don't know if it will or not, right? So you have to be technically savvy enough to trust, but also know at the same time when you're doing projects like this. So it's a fun profession. And I think, you know, from an engineering standpoint, when you get to collaborate on big projects, you know, it can be very beneficial. And I have 3 young children. So I have an 8 and 9-year-old girl and a 3-year-old son. And I told my daughters that, you know, hey, you can run the company. You don't have to be an architect to run my company if that's what you choose. Now, I'm not trying to push you to my profession, but what I'm saying is that as an architect, to run an architectural practice, you don't have to be an architect. You can be an engineer, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be an attorney, and you can still be the CEO and sit on the board and, you know, build legacy that way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.